What's your fake scenario that will never happen but I like to imagine it anyway so that I can fall asleep? In middle school I would imagine that a portal would tear through my classroom and a group of uniformed mythological people would come out and would urgently request me by name and tell me that they really needed me, and then they would whisk me away to some other world where I was their only hope in some ancient war, just so that everyone around me could wonder why I was so important. Over a decade later I'm writing a webcomic about it. Got about 100 pages out. I'm deleting it now so I can redo it since now I'm a proper adult and not a broody 15-year-old. Don't get rid of it, always save a copy to see how much of a dumbass you were. I pretend I'm a potato buried underground. It's so dark down there and the weight of the dirt comforts me. Potatoes have no fears. Potatoes have no anxiety. Sweet dreams, potato. Weird thing, but what helps me sleep is imagining that I'm sleeping with a group that's being hunted by insert fantasy creature here. But our party's wizard has created an illusory safety bubble that keeps us warm, comfortable and hidden from our would-be foes. When I was a teenager I would imagine that my bedroom was a spaceship traveling through deep space on autopilot. It had an impenetrable energy shield to keep me safe. Seeing my grandfather again. I dream about him a lot because he was the best friend I'll ever have and I really freaking miss him. It's been a long time now since he passed away and I'm starting to forget things about him and it hurts my heart so much. Maybe take the time to get a journal and write down every single thing you remember about him, every little story or detail about him, and whenever you miss him read it. IDK, I am just a 15-year-old kid, but it was an idea. I'm living in an Alpine cabin above the snow line, just me and a dog. Each day I cut firewood. Each night I spend the evening watching the fire and drinking black coffee while the dog snores. I was having such a pleasant time in your fantasy until I thought about trying to fall asleep in the freezing cold after a night of drinking black coffee by the fire. No crap. I used to envision that there's global epidemic of some kind and the world has gone to crap, looting and whatnot. The government has collapsed and I have to be super quiet to avoid the upheaval outside. I got like 60% of that for real in 2020 and it wasn't nearly as cool as my daydream. I do something similar, but the epidemic is zombies. Instead of trying to be still in bed I envision how my homestead will be set up and defended. I'm suddenly filthy rich and can finally support my family. I'd buy us a house and good health food. If we needed something I could get it. If something broke I could get it fixed. I could donate to charities and support groups. Sometime I also imagine in this world that calories don't count so I don't have to keep dieting. I imagine that I'm a homeless guy, trying to sleep on a park bench. It's freezing cold, and I only have a ragged dirty old suit on. I struggled trying to cover my body with newspapers and cardboard to keep warm. Then a kind person delivers me from this freezing heck, and places me in my warm bed where I am currently, all snuggly. Oh man, this is so effective to make you grateful and comfortable for what you have. A life where I have a GF and we're living together and doing silly things with each other and making jokes. Or going to a park or zoo and having conversations with each other. One day, right? Same. I miss falling asleep holding someone or just talking nonsense or playing silly games with. It's tough because it's impossible to predict when I'll have it again. You just keep on going about your life and then one day you meet them. I use a fan for white noise. So sometimes I pretend the sound is the humming of a spaceship and I'm sleeping in a little bed next to a big window looking out into space. That's neat. I usually imagine that I'm going to sleep next to someone I love, despite being intensely single. Of course, I'm not myself in this imaginary scenario, since I'm younger, and more attractive, and more talented, and more interesting. And, of course, this other person is totally imaginary too. And sometimes it's in some kind of sword and sorcery fantasy world, but not always. Sometimes thinking about it makes me cry because I know I'm too old and too ugly for this to ever happen. But sometimes I can sink into it enough that I'll fall asleep. I want to give you a big hug. I've never met you, but you're not ugly and there's no such thing as too old when it comes to finding love. A very weird thing that helps me sleep. I make a story in my mind. Right now it's set in the Walking Dead universe. There's this girl named Rose and this guy named Arthur. Other characters of course, but I tell stories about what they go through. It kinda mirrors my life struggles but in the land of the dead. Don't judge me. I used to fantasize about winning the lottery to go to sleep. It can be fun. Mainly I think about where I would go on travel, what concerts I would see, how many festivals can I do in a year, etc. As I've gotten older, I recognize that winning the lottery is quite likely to ruin my life instead of elevate it. I'm fairly fortunate in my career and so I have the privilege to say this. I'm not hungry, my kids get clothes in school, I am able to pay a mortgage, stuff like that. See? When you start thinking about this stuff, it doesn't help with sleep. So sometimes I think of myself in the world of one of my favorite movies or books. How would I contribute to the events or interact with the characters? Harry Potter is a special favorite. I still dream about winning the lotto, even though I know it ruins lives. I don't actually want to win it, I just like to think about having unlimited money. I miscarried a baby several years ago now. Through resulting complications I lost my ability to have children. I have no idea why, but I just know it was a little girl. Most nights I fall asleep thinking about who she would have become. I'm so sorry, I hope it brings you comfort at least. Don't laugh, I think about becoming super successful, happy, and beautiful, and then randomly encountering the boys who called me ugly and not giving them the time of day. I've won the lottery, and it's a big one. I've secretly collected my winnings. I've bought a big plot of land with lots of beautiful and unique scenery, and I'm building homes for my immediate family and best friend that somehow are technologically advanced and good for the environment, with respect for the environment around us being heavily considered. I find a financial investor I can trust to build my money, take some risks, invest in green businesses and set up trusts for my children, grandchildren and so on. I can now afford to always shop in small businesses, farmers markets, craft shows and mom and pop places. I'm able to invest wisely and dress inconspicuously, so that I do things like leave a $100 tip for a cup of coffee. They wonder who I was. Oh, and my family can finally have the dogs, cats, birds, guinea pigs, turtles, fish and rabbits that they've been asking for. I think about my grandma's house. She passed away 2 years ago after having a stroke that basically paralyzed her from the neck down. She had lived in that condition for 8 years before she died. I think about coming home from school and her giving me milk and cookies while I played Ocarina of Time with the fire roaring. Unlike the video game, I can't go back in time and visit her again, but it's nice to remember. It's weird how I can remember exactly what my grandma's house smelled like, even though it sold about 5 years ago. This is a good one. Grandmas are so special. I go to the pub and pick up cute boys by talking to them about Lord of the Rings. Then we end up talking about Lotto for hours and I seduce them with my nerdiness. So just go to a nerd convention and this could be real. I like to imagine being in a cave in a blizzard, cozy in the cave while the whipping winds of my ceiling fan circulate oxygen in my blanket den. That my bed is floating in the middle of the ocean but I'm safe and warm with my cat curled up at my feet. Really does the trick. That and sedatives. Beach life. Palm tree with warm winds, not too hot but comfortable. What I imagine a resort in paradise with those solo huts to be like. My parents live on the beach. When I visit them I sleep with the windows cracked. Warm air, salt smell, palm trees, breeze. Oh man, I sleep the best there. So Chick-fil-A has a thing where once a year you dress up as a cow and get free food. So my scenario is that me, my best friend, who I don't have yet, and the rest of my grade dress up in inflatable cow suits and raid Chick-fil-A for free food during that event. There's also one where the same thing happens except it's at Olive Garden and everyone is wearing inflatable dinosaur costumes. We seat ourselves and say please and thank you, put our napkins in our laps, push in our chairs, treat everyone with respect, etc. I play out conversations about the weirdest things with random people, like talking about animal cruelty with the guys who wrote Phineas and Ferb. Apparently it's what PPL who have been through trauma do to process stuff, but I think my brain is just slow. I'm in the Star Wars universe, mostly banging Kylo Ren or the Mandalorian. but once in a while I just have cool force powers and lightsaber skills. Guy here, also in the Star Wars universe. Similar situation but different characters lol. There is something that always keeps playing in my head. I am part of the Teutonic Order fighting a glorious last stand to shift the battle at the last second in our favor. I don't have this anymore, but when I was a kid, like age 11-14, I would imagine that I'd suddenly wake up skinny, or I would wake up and realize I switched bodies with Anna Sophia Robb or Selena Gomez so that I would be pretty and people would like me more. I'd imagine going shopping and buying clothes that I never used to be able to wear, and I'd imagine the other girls in my class being nicer to me, and I'd imagine the guy I liked would talk to me. I'm glad I'm not that kid anymore. I try out for American Idol and I am able to give every girl over 18 except my family members intense orgasms just by singing except through car radios. I don't even like to sing. Lottery win and how I would tell family and treat them to gifts etc. Also how I could affect the world. I don't struggle for money for myself at the moment but £100 million is a world changing level of money. I usually slumber off to thinking about a fantasy world. Maps is what we call it. My friends and I started drawing maps around the beginning of high school. Big elaborate geographical maps with towns, places, points of interest. We have lists of all the creatures, cultures, what the technology is like. I have it all stuffed in a briefcase. It's probably 11 years old. I keep a notebook to jot down ideas and names, but mostly think about some of the protagonist's problems, the history of that world, what new creatures I can think up. My one friend and I discuss it from time to time. I've really wanted to turn some of our short stories into books, but never had the drive to stick to one narrative. It's changed from fantasy to more realism over the years but I've always fell asleep thinking about the red road into the coastal town of Twin Oaks. Think 1890s tech, vast wilderness, walled cities, exploration, rulers and wars. You know the works. I'm huddled by a fire in a shelter during the last ice age after a successful hunt and listening to the stories of elders. Snuggled in heavy warm furs with my husband, the fire crackles. Our wolf pup sleeps next to us. The wolves are howling outside and hyenas cackle on the plains. A lone cry of a large saber-toothed cat or cave lion bellows over miles across the cold-swept plains. Our hut is part of a lodge, connected by mammoth bones built by our predecessors, fortified with strong boughs, hides, even stones. It keeps us warm and dry. The wind howls long and lonely like the wolves bringing snow and ice. Wrapped in furs, I cuddle with my husband as it keeps us warm underneath. I kiss him, and he wraps himself around me. I hear the low breathing of our puppy with slight running in his sleep. The elders talk long into the night, a low chorus, against hide and stick walls. I can hear owls calling too, breaking a harsh cold silence after the wolves have moved. The wind is blowing and the soft hush of snow falling. I feel myself drifting in the warmth of the furs and embrace of my love. The last I see are the embers and soft orange flames of the fire. This is really dang good. I feel myself just drifting away too by reading this. I like to imagine going back in a time as a 14-year-old but retaining my current brain but everything else is the same. How do I convince my dad that I know the future? Would telling him change it? Would I go to high school like a normal 14-year-old or would I skip it? So this requires lots of backstory. Last year I became really good friends with this girl. I had known her before cause we go to the same school, but now we were real close. I started developing a crush on her gradually. As our friendship progressed it got stronger. Then one morning we were joking and being stupid before school and I suddenly realized I loved her. Kept it a secret for about 4 or so months, but then I finally told her, and we're really close now. Result: rejection. Turns out she's a romantic. Not gonna explain what that means for those of you who don't know, Google it. So not really personal and not her fault, just not possible. So my sleep fantasy is that story playing out in a completely different way. My crappy buttocks can and stuff lets me escape reality and enter in my own little world where I have nothing to worry about. I live back in the 70s or 90s where nobody uses their mobile phone all day, and I move abroad to somewhere like Germany, Austria or Switzerland and work and live in a ski resort. And that's it. All day I teach skiing lessons and at night I socialize and talk and meet people. Maybe on the weekend I catch a train into the nearest village and get something to eat by the river. I had no idea making up fake scenarios to fall asleep was such a common thing. I honestly thought I was the only one damaged enough. I have a few. I am intentionally single, I'm a rather selfish human being and I honestly dislike living with other people, and I would absolutely hate having to share my bed. I sometimes think about falling asleep next to a loving girlfriend, or think about our toddler climbing into bed to sleep with us. Sometimes, in the winter, I think about being on a camping trip and how snuggly and warm I am compared to how cold it is outside. Heated mattress pad, 3 cats, 2 warm blankets. Sometimes I go through happier childhood memories. I'll walk through my grandparents' house in my mind. Sometimes I think about how the sunrise in the summer looks, or how a summer sunset looks. Sometimes I'll think about how the autumn or winter twilight feels. As a kid I used to imagine Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen moving into my neighbor's house. We broke the wall down between the houses to make one large house. It's a semi-detached. This is the early 2000s. Ever since I was a kid I've imagined this scenario where I'm in a wagon on the Oregon Trail and it's my turn to guide the oxen in a few hours, so I better get some sleep while I can. Honestly still works. I picture being in a small boat in the middle of the ocean at night. The moon's full, and everything has a slight indigo tint. The waves are gently lapping. I'm standing in line at the bank. Everyone is oblivious, but I notice a sketchy guy enter the building, so I prepare for the worst. Guy goes to the counter and puts a gun to the head of the customer at the counter. He shouts, "Everyone on the floor now!" I drop to the floor along with everyone else but keep my eyes on the guy. As he's shouting at the cashier to give him the money, I low crawl behind the table holding deposit slips and whatnot. The guy is super tweaked out and screaming at the top of his lungs, so he doesn't hear me creep up behind him. Bam, I get him on the floor into an arm bar or something jujitsu-ish. This is a fantasy, not at all realistic of course. The guy drops the gun. Police rush in. I stand up and brush my hands off. Thankful I was able to save the day. Delusional for sure, but fun to be a hero in my own mind I guess. Now that I see it written out, it's super cringe. My childhood dog passed away a year ago. Since I was a kid, she slept at the foot of my bed and, like clockwork, woke me up at 6 AM every morning whining to come under the covers with me. Now to fall asleep I think of those transient moments of sleepy bliss at 6 AM when I'd stroke her from the tip of her nose to her head and watch her eyes blink to sleep next to me. I have used this technique for years. I win the powerball and collect the money anonymously. I pay off all my family's mortgages, buy them luxury cars that they find parked in their driveways, establish giant scholarships at my high school and college, buy houses for the families I have mentored over the years, give huge donations to my favorite non-profits, and keep wishing up fun and wonderful surprises on and on till I can sleep. You can't win if you don't play. G night. Whoa, this thread blew my mind. I thought I was only person who did this. Me as some Lord of the Rings style story I create. I never get past the names of then characters though before I'm out cold. I am the king of a medieval kingdom, but I am super laid back, which annoys all the members of the royal court because I don't follow the traditions closely enough. That I wake up and win the lottery so my family can stop fearing debt and stop worrying about being evicted from our house and having nowhere to live, and so I don't have to wake up every day sweating and wondering how much longer I'll make it, and how the heck I'll live when I'm forced into situations for money when I'm not capable because frick mental illness. Please, some god out there be merciful. I like to imagine having the power to communicate with animals. For example, I think it would be cool if I saw the squirrel outside foraging in the winter. I'm all like, "Hey bud, want some food? I have nuts and stuff." We then hang out, shoot the crap, talk about cool squirrel things. Then, in the morning, I send him on his way with a little backpack filled with snacks and stuff. It's silly, but could you imagine the interesting friends you could make being able to communicate clearly with any animal? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.